Thank you, Joanna, and thank all of you for coming today. I'd like to welcome all of our chamber members and our guests. And as Joanna mentioned, we are particularly honored today to be joined by many local, county, state, and federal government officials, and I'd like to welcome all of you and thank you for coming. As you all know, our speaker today is Congressman Brad Schneider. Congressman Schneider represents Illinois' 10th District in the United States House of Representatives, where he is serving in his second term. And he sits on the Foreign Affairs, Judiciary, and Small Business Committees. As a member of Congress, Brad is focused on building a thriving economy that works for all of us and ensuring every child has an opportunity for a quality education and a rising standard of living. He knows that our communities are stronger when small businesses like ours invest and grow, our environment is healthy, and people are working together for a better future. Prior to being elected to Congress, Brad spent more than 20 years in business and management consulting, helping large and family-owned businesses address the challenges of today's economy and plan for the future. His professional experience has allowed him to see firsthand the challenges small businesses face when trying to hire new workers and grow their companies. At home, Brad has deep ties to the community, including with service organizations such as the Jewish United Fund, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, the Waukegan Public Library Foundation, BEST, and the Civic Leadership Foundation. Brad earned his BS degree in industrial engineering and his MBA from Northwestern University. He and his wife, Julie, have been residents of Deerfield for more than 25 years, where they created a home, built their careers, and most importantly, raised their two sons, Adam and Daniel. Now it's my distinct honor to introduce Congressman Brad Schneider.
Thank you, Steve. And I'm going to stand in front of the podium if that's okay. Just because the way things are, I tend to pace a lot now. I did check the news before coming up, and there's nothing new to report since yesterday. So I always check now because anything can happen at any time. But in all seriousness, Steve, thank you for the kind words. Joanne, thank you for organizing this. And thank you all, everyone here, for your support for the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff Chamber. This is not my first time joining you. I am a fan of all the things you are doing in the community. This is, I believe, one of the strongest chambers we have in the 10th District. Talking to my colleagues, it's one of the strongest chambers I'm aware of. So again, thank you for what you do. And I want to finish my thank yous by thanking all the elected officials and community representatives here. I know how hard it is to do what you do. I represent the 10th District in Washington. I talk about how strong our communities are. I believe if we have strong communities, if we're building communities, giving it more opportunity for everything from education to business development to infrastructure and economic development in general, the stronger our communities are, the stronger our state is, the stronger our nation is. So thank you for what you guys do each and every day. I'm just going to talk for a couple minutes. I'd much rather take questions. But broadly speaking, obviously, I don't need to tell you these are interesting times. Being back in Congress after having been away for 2 years, I cannot begin to tell you how different things are now. They're always different in any transition from one administration to another. But if you look at what's not just happening in Washington, but what's happening around the world, we are suffering the Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. These are very interesting times. And I think it is a crossroads where we need to look to government, and I'll include our state government in this as well, to find paths to come together to continue to lead. We need to lead not just on the global stage, and this is something I have the opportunity to observe from the Foreign Affairs Committee, but we need to lead in technology. We need to lead in development of small business. We need to make sure that we're investing in our future in infrastructure. Our infrastructure is crumbling across the country. 4 years ago, it was given a D grade. In some cases, we made progress, but in many cases, we continue to lag behind. And if we don't invest in that infrastructure while the rest of the world is investing, we're going to fall behind the ability to engage in global commerce. We need to invest in education. Our kids Sitting here in Lake Forest, we have one of the best high schools in the country. The kids coming out of Lake Forest High School have the whole world open to them. But using just China and India as an example, and I talk about this all the time, China's educated 250,000 new engineers last year. Our number's around 25,000. Using that multiple, if China and India have 10 times as many kids as we have, if they only educate 1/10 of their population to honors level, they'll have more honor students than we have kids to educate at all. And in an economy where ideas drive it, where new technologies, and I'm looking for the Victor people over there, a technology product that's going to move our country forward, we have to be at the forefront of that. We have to educate all of our kids, not just the ones in Lake Forest, but across the country. And that's something I focus on. Let me talk a little bit about what my primary focuses are while in Congress. I'll start with the Small Business Committee, in part because I'm here talking to a chamber, but in part because this is something so close to me. I spent my career working with small and medium-sized businesses. I understand that it's small businesses that drive our economy. 55% of all people work or own small businesses. 65%. Typically, 65% of all new jobs in the country are created by small businesses, and some of those grow on to be large businesses. This last recession, 2008, 2009, as we've had the recovery for the last 6-7 years, it's the first time small businesses haven't led the recovery, but in fact have lagged. And there are a lot of reasons that people can posit for why that is, but I think some of it is a lack of confidence with what's happening in government and the uncertainty about the future. Family-owned businesses, small businesses can make the decision, we'll wait 6 months, and 6 months can become a year or 2 years, and they just keep waiting. That's started to change. Some of that is lack of access to capital. As we tried to address the problems of the financial crisis of the last decade, pendulum swing, and we made right steps. I support Dodd-Frank and some of the things that we tried to achieve in Dodd-Frank, but especially with community banks, and Jim, I'll look at you as a banker, we took the judgment away from community banks, and small businesses, entrepreneurs who have close banking relationships. Sometimes it may not fit the formula that applies to large companies, international banking. But if you only get and I'll make up the numbers, if you only get 75 instead of an 80-point score for what you need, but because you know the character of the person, because you know that they're part of the community, because you have that relationship, Steve, you're nodding, is there may be 7 points that aren't showing up in that formula, or maybe 25 points that aren't showing up in that formula, but we hamstrung. So on the Small Business Committee, I and my colleagues, and this isn't a bipartisan effort, have been working to make sure that we can provide small businesses greater access to capital, greater access to talent, because it's not just the capital, it's finding the people who can work in these businesses. And as I travel around the district and talk to people, large and small, they're saying we don't have the ability to find the people we need. And there are things we can do on talent that apply, that have legislative solutions. One of the ones when we were talking about it, I introduced a bill that would allow veterans, retiring veterans, to use their post 9/11 GI Bill dollars for internships and apprenticeships with companies, focused on small businesses and manufacturing firms. Doing this addresses a number of issues. One, a lot of these veterans, they went into the military because they didn't want to be in a classroom. In their military experience, they've gotten hands-on experience that is directly applicable to what businesses are looking for. Businesses don't necessarily have the resources to pay for a learning curve for 6 months to 12 years. So if we allow those dollars to go to the business for a approved apprenticeship or internship program, 6 months to a year, it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the veteran who has a job immediately coming out. It's a win for the small business because they're able to train and employ on their specific needs. And it's a win for the community because you've got people moving into communities and businesses growing. This is the type of legislation that we're working to move forward. I also, this past week, just reintroduced a bill. I introduced it when I was in Congress the first time, called the Accelerate Our Startups Act. This is working with local communities and the federal government, private-public partnership, to promote incubators and accelerators working with small businesses outside of the usual places, whether that's San Francisco or Boston or even downtown Chicago, communities like Lake Forest. In fact, when we introduced this bill in 2014, we visited the incubator here in Lake Forest to promote it. Federal dollars would match local community dollars as well as private sector dollars, so it's a third, a third, a third, to try to create opportunities for small businesses to go from startup to step out to success in a faster way. These are some of the ideas that I'm working with on my colleagues on the Small Business Committee, where I think we can make a difference to help small businesses with access to talent, with access to capital, hopefully with a more stable business environment, leaving the last piece to the individual businesses, which is the business model. We can't develop the business model. That's going to be up to you guys, but if we can provide the foundation, the economy grows, and we can get small businesses growing the way we need it to again. In addition to Small Business Committee, I mentioned I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Again, my perspective, I think the nation is better when we are engaged globally, where we're working with our allies, working with our adversaries when we can, but also prepared to stand up when we must. The world looks to the United States to lead, and so of all the committees in Congress, this is probably the most bipartisan committee. We work very well together across the aisle. The chairman and the ranking member, Ed Royce, Elliot Engel, collaborate very well. Anytime there's legislation that's moving through, almost any time, amendments are taken. We go from ideas to improve them to bring them to the floor, and they often pass with broad bipartisan support. And then my third committee is Judiciary Committee. My focus there is really on trying to address some of the issues we face around immigration. The Judiciary Committee is responsible for immigration. Every chance I get to talk about moving forward with a comprehensive immigration reform that secures our border, but also helps drive our economy by bringing people out of the shadows, giving them the opportunity to start businesses, buy homes, educate their kids. I think we need to do that to move it forward. It's not just me saying that. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that if we passed immigration reform, the bill that was introduced in 2013, it would add $2 trillion to our economy, reduce our debt over the next decade by upwards of $300 billion. Not insignificant numbers, and that's something that I hope to lead on in the Judiciary Committee. As well as immigration, it's also intellectual property. Again, businesses who invest in ideas want to be able to get the return on those ideas, rule of law to protect their investment, and that's something that I hope to lead on as well. So with that as a brief introduction, let me open up the floor and tell me what's on your mind. Please.
About resources for small businesses, helping small businesses grow, small businesses being the backbone of the economy. Is your focus more on providing more government resources for small businesses in order to help them grow, or more focused on cutting the red tape that prevents small businesses from growing? And I wanted to understand your attitude about what really drives small business growth.
It's both. I don't think it's one or the other. So let me touch on the regulatory environment. I do believe we need regulatory reform, but I do believe there's a place for regulation. And I think in pictures, so I'll use my analogy on this one. I view regulations as the bumpers in the gutter at a bowling alley. If the bumpers start to encroach on the alley and narrow the ability for each of us, each individual or business, to knock down the pins, they've gone too far. But if they start to recede such that the balls are ending up in the gutter, they've gone too far the other way. Nothing's static. We have to be dynamic in policy and constantly working to make sure that we're managing those bumpers so they're not restricting the ability of small businesses to do what it is they want to do, but we are making sure that the regulations are achieving their goals. The example I always use on specific regulations, I use the SEC and insider trading. If we don't have regulations around insider trading, investors are going to lose confidence in our markets. If investors lose confidence in our markets, businesses lose the capacity to raise the capital they need for growth. So we have to constantly be managing that and protecting that, and that's something where I think on the Small Business Committee we work very aggressively with the SBA, with other bodies. We had the new administrator of the SBA, Linda McMahon, who I will confess, I went into the hearing a little bit skeptical because I had this image of wrestling. She was very impressive. She gave good answers. She talked about working together. I'm hopeful that we can, through the SBA, help businesses. So that gets to the second part of your question. Through the SBA, there are ways we can provide businesses with the skills and tools they need to succeed. One example is the Import-Export Bank. There's efforts to eliminate the bank, and the argument is it's just a subsidy for large companies, and everyone always points to Boeing, which happens to now be an Illinois company. Well, every Boeing aircraft that is sold around the world carries products from 8,000 companies, many of which are small local businesses, even here in our district. The Import-Export Bank, or Export-Import Bank, helps promote those. But as well, even though it's not the big ticket items, the Ex-Im Bank promotes small businesses. Most companies that are exporting tend to export to one country, to one customer. It's not that they're a global company, it's that they have a customer outside the country. If they're going to expand that relationship to actually be a net exporter, to be a company that is going to compete on the global stage, there are things they need to, skills they need to develop. Understanding of market mechanisms or intergovernmental transactions, intergovernment regulations they need to deal with. And the Ex-Im Bank provides help, the SBA provides help with that. And we had a number of programs when I was in first time where we would invite companies to talk. You'd be amazed how many small businesses came to understand that. So there are things we can do to help those companies, but there's also things we need to be doing constantly to review and make sure the regulations aren't hampering those businesses. Please.
You mentioned Dodd-Frank. I just have two questions on that. One, so is it your intent to revise Dodd-Frank and not necessarily repeal and replace it? And also, I have friends and colleagues who are on both sides of the aisle who have complained about the amount of paperwork involved with compliance with Dodd-Frank. I personally think that transparency is very important, but at the same time, I understand that a lot of money has been spent trying to comply with these provisions. Is Congress going to look to help provide that to make it less costly, but at the same time balance?
So two sides to the questions. Thank you. Great question. First one is I don't think we should repeal Dodd-Frank. I think we need to work to refine it and make sure that it's achieving what we want it to achieve. We can't go back to a time where a systemically important financial institution is so intertwined that its failure would lead to the failure of our entire financial system. One of the examples, not small business, is actually on the Judiciary Committee. We introduced and actually passed legislation this year that deals with bankruptcy of a large financial institution, a SIFI, and creating a mechanism where it can be done in a way that allows the institution to continue operating, the holding company, which may hold other financial institutions that are not in trouble, to continue operating. This is a revision of Dodd-Frank without eliminating. We passed it with, broad bipartisan support. We went through a process called regular order, which is someone introduces a bill, you have hearings, you have the committee understand what are the implications. If there are amendments to hopefully improve it, you have those amendments and it goes to the floor. This bill went through that process and hopefully we'll get it through the Senate and address it. So we have to make sure that we are supporting our financial system, that we're supporting the markets, that we aren't putting ourselves in a position where we go back to 2007, 2008, where the interlacing is there. But on this bankruptcy provision, just as an example, the modeling said if we had it in place in 2008, when Lehman Brothers failed, we could have managed the process with Lehman Brothers without having the crisis that followed. So we are learning, and hopefully we'll move forward. Please.
So I just wanted to talk about your comment regarding how China and India is trading a lot more energy than we are, but I know with the advent of automation and everything, it's really cool that kids today really know about coding and engineering. And I traveled to schools in China and Korea and Singapore, and middle schoolers, they're graduating all knowing about computer code, but when we talk to schools and people in our school districts, there's always a lack of confidence and lack of trained teachers. So in this crucial time where all the engineers outside of our country, I mean all the students outside of our country are getting trained on all these modern concepts, are there any initiatives or funds being raised to help our schools get up to at least parity with the
So it's a great question. Just to repeat the question is, as we look at schools around the country where kids are getting into STEM education at earliest grades, you'd mentioned middle school, you're seeing it even in elementary school. We are having trouble here finding STEM teachers, and there are programs to try to promote opportunities for our teachers to get their degrees and go, individuals to get science degrees and move into STEM teaching. Those programs are under threat with the budget that the president offered. We'll work to try to continue those. We need to make sure that the schools have the resources. We need to work to close the tech gap. So some communities have multiple computers for every child in the school, have the latest technology, and when technology changes next year or the year after, they're able to stay current with that technology. Other schools don't even have textbooks, let alone computers, and we're falling back. This is true not just in many urban communities, but in particular in rural communities, where even if they had the computers, they don't necessarily have the broadband access to reach the internet. So we need to try to close that. There are programs such as E-Rate, which tries to put technology into schools at a more affordable cost. I'd like to see us work on creating programs that allow students to offset some or much of their student debt when they graduate. If they have a technical degree, going to teach in communities of need, those are some of the programs we're looking at. We have to understand we're competing in a global economy where, because of the rate of change in technology, and this is true in business as well, the ability of companies, or in this case countries, to leapfrog and catch up in a very short period of time, where it might have taken a generation or a century for a country to catch up after the Industrial Revolution, now it takes just a couple of years to catch up. And a perfect example is on cell phone technology. You know, we lag in the United States. We pay more for lower quality in the United States than some developing countries have in their cell phone technology. As the kids in those countries with advanced technologies are learning those technologies, taking them for granted, if we don't educate our kids, we're going to fall behind. And it's not just China and India. So, Steve.
Is there anything underway, either from a formal or informal standpoint, in the freshman class of representatives to try and get the two parties, the various factions, to work together more effectively to get things done?
Great question. I'll touch on two pieces. There are a number of things, but there's two specific initiatives. So we were talking before about some of the hyperpartisanship in the freshman class, and at some levels it exists. At other levels, and in fairness, thank you for asking the question, there's a serious effort to try to bridge that gap. The freshman class, both sides did sign a pledge, a civility pledge, and that we do talk to each other and work with each other. They call freshmen members of Congress freshmen for a reason. It is like going to college and you go through orientation, and there's 4 weeks of orientation that you get to know the members on both sides of the aisle. So you have a chance to talk. So there is that civility pledge, but taking it a step further, a number of us have had the opportunity to get together. One great example is we had about a dozen members went to the Holocaust Museum for a tour one evening. And afterwards we sat around debriefing and talking, and the conversation naturally went from the Holocaust to discussion of refugees to discussion of immigration. So a fairly loaded issue from a partisan standpoint. As we were talking, the Republican members were saying, you know, we'd love to be here on this issue or that issue, but it's hard for us given the politics. As a group, we said, let's continue our conversations in private. So I'm not going to tell you who was in the conversation, but we are looking, it's easy for me as a Democrat to be out front on immigration. Our district supports immigration reform. My party supports immigration reform. I'm not in a difficult spot. But my Republican friends in this conversation, it's hard for them. They're going to get attacked from their right on this issue. Their party may be in a different position. How do they, without sticking their neck out, having it chopped off, how do they take a step forward? So we're working together to try to find language where we can work with each other to do that. So that's an example that I'm very proud of. The second example I'll touch on is something called the Problem Solvers Caucus. Now, this is not freshmen, this is all members of Congress. I'm a part of it. There are 25 Democrats, 20 Republicans. When we started it, we set the number at 20. We thought, let's start small, and the demand was so high that we raised it to 25. Everyone committed to working together, sitting down, having conversations, and looking for areas where we can move the ball forward. Initially, in the first meeting, we talked about what are some things we can talk about that aren't going to be lightning rods or third rails. And we're working on those types of issues. Unfortunately, because of the news and everything right now is so top of the charts, right? We continue to work. We'll see where we can get to. I think as things settle down, as healthcare moves forward and we go on to the next thing, there's going to be a lot of opportunities, especially around tax reform, where there's broad bipartisan support for doing something. What that something is we agree on the need to do something. We disagree on how that looks. Well, we start with common ground. Let's continue to work with that. So I'm proud to be part of that, and we'll continue to work out with problem solvers. And both my freshman classes, I have the benefit of having done it twice. So I have time for one more question. I apologize, I have to go, but if there is one, or if not, I will wrap up.
Healthcare, anything you can, and we have questions.
I'm in favor of healthcare. We're going to see where it goes. Look, I have said all along that the Affordable Care Act was a step forward, but it was far from perfect. I took a lot of grief in 2013 when I first got to Congress, when I was a co-sponsor to repeal the medical device tax. Medical device tax was a tax on top-line sales for medical device companies. When you think about so much of the innovation in medicine is medical devices, think about a company who may have sales, but that certainly doesn't have profits yet, and we're going to add a tax on that. We're putting out their break even a little bit further. It is, in my mind, this was a clear restrictor on innovation, which is going to be the driver to addressing our healthcare needs into the future. So I did, and we still haven't gotten there. Repeal, we need to get to that. But I don't think we should repeal the Affordable Care Act. I think we should build on its successes, fix its problems, and what can't be fixed, try something else. We see now that there is this American Health Care Act, as it's called. I do not think it is a step in the right direction. In quick summary, it would provide less care at a higher cost for fewer people. That's not me saying that. That's the independent Congressional Budget Office saying that. But I think we have to let the process play out. It's in the Senate now. I hope the Senate, and by all indications, the Senate will refine it, revise it, and send it back to the House. I would like to see us get to a point where we can actually have the bipartisan discussion, where it is Democrats and Republicans, and it may be the Problem Solvers Caucus where we have the chance to take the initiative on that. But right now, it is all us and all them, depending on which side of us and them you are, that are having the conversations. Until it gets to all of us together, it's going to be a battle. So like I said, I'm disappointed with what happened last week in the House. I would like to get to that let's fix it together moment sooner. Every day we wait, I was saying this earlier, President Obama signed the Affordable Care Act in March of 2010. We are now in May of 2017, and no progress has been made on healthcare policy. Healthcare marches forward. The policymakers will always be behind the technology, but we need to work to keep up, and that's true on regulation of small business. It's true on any policy. If we ever believe that we can have it done once and be done with it forever, I think that's the wrong path. It has to be something that's constantly reconsidered, reviewed, and keeps pace with an ever-changing world. So thank you. And with that, oh wait, Joanna.
Brad, I was just going to say thank you so much. And I was going to ask if, first of all, you would be here for a couple of minutes in case someone has a question they would like to ask you. And then the second part of that question is, if someone would like to reach you, what's the best way to do so?
Great, thank you. Let me do a commercial for a couple things. I want to introduce Megan Ryan, who's my district director. If you're talking to me, you're talking to Megan, it's the same thing. Megan's here all the time. She manages our office here. We have a team of 8 people in district. We are here to serve you anyway, every day. So any issue you might have with a federal agency, a question you might have, please reach out to our office. You can reach us by telephone. The number is 847-383-4870. It's in the community guide. You can also reach us online, and the phone numbers for both offices are online, schneider.house.gov. As far as electronic communication, going through the website at schneider.house.gov is actually a very effective way to do it. While Megan and I are here, if someone is making a question or sharing a thought online, we have staff immediately working on it. It gets registered, it gets assigned, and we can start addressing it right away. So that's not a way to push off, but an invitation to engage is through our website. That's a great way to connect with us, and we will get back to you. We are in the process. Our goal is to respond to every single communication that comes into the office. I think we may be already over 50,000 communications in. Our goal is to get back to you always within 2 weeks. Right now we're at about 30 days as we're ramping up. So that's the best way. So thank you for that. So Schneider.house.gov is a way to connect. And the other thing I would say is sign up for our newsletter, so you'll have a chance to understand what we're doing. We send that out typically every week about what happened last week, what's happening this week, what to look forward to. So it's a way to know how to reach us. And feel free to call us anytime. Like I said, we are here for anything you might need every day of the week. So thank you. And thank you for giving me this chance.